And we were saying it at the beginning, it's a new enlistment day in Venezuela as the government has summoned the people to join forces against U.S. military threats. People are going and heading to squares once again and other enlistment points to enroll themselves and get ready to defend their homeland. To go deeper into this topic and to really understand what this means, we welcome now International Studies Professor Danny Shou. Danny, it's a pleasure to have you here with us in From the South as usual.
Good morning, Belen. Thank you for the invite.
So, Danny, you've been following, of course, the latest developments between the U.S. and its new escalation against the region. How do you evaluate this response from the Venezuelan people?
The Venezuelan people have every right to defend their sovereignty. This has nothing to do with a war on drugs, as the Trump regime would want us to believe. This has everything to do with a war on Venezuela, a war on all of South America's sovereignty. The war on drugs, with the fall of the Soviet Union, became the new convenient ideological smokescreen and excuse for U.S. intervention. So much of the world's cocaine, something like 90%, comes from Colombia, where the United States has 9 military bases as well as 3 drug enforcement agency centers. But as Hugo Chavez told us about a generation ago, it's the DEA and it's the CIA, those who pretend to combat drugs, that are actually behind this nearly $1 trillion international cocaine economy.
Now, Danny, from an international studies perspective, there's a lot that has been said regarding how this discourse that the U.S. is trying to enforce regarding the alleged war on drugs, how does this really relate to what is happening in the United States? So how are you looking at this scenario from what is happening to the Trump administration at this moment?
Was very cynical and hypocritical. They would try to use this war on drugs as an excuse to make war on other lands, because the truth is we're dying at home here in the United States. We do suffer from an opioid epidemic that's been going on now for almost a generation. An average of 200,000 Americans lose their lives every year, and overwhelmingly it's from overdoses, from opioids, from heroin, and of course fentanyl. This has nothing to do with Nicolas Maduro. This has nothing to do with Venezuela, but Trump, as the demagogue in chief and the scapegoater in chief, they're very good at deflecting blame, not assuming any blame. If we want to understand the role of drugs in the United States, it's the #1 consumer, not just of cocaine and illegal drugs, but also of all of the quote unquote legal drugs, the antidepressants, the anti anxiety medications. So we live in a culture consumed in violence and consumed in drugs. And this is a moment for us as a nation, as American people, to look deep within, to ask ourselves, where does this pandemic, this drug pandemic, come from? And it doesn't come from Venezuela, it doesn't come from China, it doesn't come from Mexico. That's just a way for the U.S. foreign policy establishment and the State Department to continue to go after their international geopolitical rivals.
Now, of course, this military threats in the Caribbean Sea is really a new development in the last weeks, and there's been a lot of alarm, of course, from the countries in the Caribbean, in South America, regarding to what this means. You were saying, of course, this discourse of the war on drugs is just a pretext that is being used, but how should we really understand that deployment, and also how should these governments respond to this? Is unity the way? Is this collaboration that we are seeing between different countries the way to go? How are you looking at what is maybe to come in the coming weeks?
This is an egregious threat. Up until now, it's been more of a shadow war, or a quiet war, or a hybrid war against the Venezuelan people. This is a huge escalation, sending 4 of the U.S.'s top warships, thousands and thousands of sailors and Marines. This represents a very grave threat. We've seen a history of how many interventions, how many invasions and occupations in the hemisphere by the U.S. Government. The world is watching very closely. They know that Russia is completely bogged down with the proxy NATO-U.S. war against them, using the Ukrainian people They know Iran is on their back heels right now. And they know Venezuela is the key piece to the multipolar project throughout the world, it being the spearhead of the Bolivarian momentum of the quote unquote pink tide in the late 1990s. That legacy is still there, and they want to do everything they can to thwart that legacy to make sure that Venezuela cannot team up with Beijing and Moscow and Tehran and in Havana. So that's what this represents. And these colonial bullies know no bounds. We see the colonial Holocaust playing out in Gaza every day. We see what they're doing, occupying Haiti, turning U.S. guns against the Haitian masses. And now they're trying to inflict more instability in Venezuela. So, of course, the Venezuelan people are going to mobilize. Some 5 million Bolivarian militia members have been called up and are standing guard on the nation's frontiers and borders to defend their self-determination, and correctly so.
Thank you so much, Danny, for giving us, of course, your perspective to continue understanding not just what is happening today in Venezuela, but also just understanding the deeper roots and deeper causes of this escalation that the U.S. has brought upon the region. Thank you, Danny, for joining us once again in From the South.
Thank you, Belén.
That was Danny Show, professor of international studies